Hi everyone, welcome to Tuesday's episode of Casual Watch Talk Live. Welcome everybody in the comments. Should we do a wristwatch check? I'm joined by Seiko Todd and Patrick from Pocket Watch Time on YouTube. Seiko Todd's new Instagram, which you're doing a very good job of posting daily.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I have so much I can post, so I'm just trying to put on like a new post once a day.
Yeah, so great. A lot of vintage Seiko. So if you're vintage Seiko fans like I am, Todd, what you wearing? What you adorning on your wrist?
Well, unfortunately, I don't have my Speedmaster with me, so I'm here at my dad's house. But I did bring kind of like I think my new favorites in terms of just having on and traveling is the Zenith Rainbow Flyback chronograph.
Oh yeah.
So this is a 40 millimeters. It's so wearable. It's got the butterfly deployant from Zenith. So there it is. Nice. And it's very comfortable. It's a great watch to wear all the time. And so that's what I have now. However, I do, in order to present information, I have the Omega 2020 latest Omega, very beefy sucker from the AD. So I got an Omega book here from the AD I happen to have.
Nice.
So, yeah,
that's a beautiful movement they have on the front there. It almost looks like an old pocket watch.
Isn't that beautiful?
Like that,
I don't know
that
what
Damascening. They don't put that on any Omegas. Otherwise, I might like them more.
Ooh, yeah. I got to see where this cover shot is from. I'll look while you introduce. See if I can find it.
Yeah, what's on your wrist?
Well, today I got a brand new ring from Amazon.com for $13 because whenever I wear a watch with a color, I have to buy a wedding ring to match it. So today I'm matching my white ceramic GP with a white ceramic wedding ring because I'm a weirdo.
No, you're not.
Oh, of course I am.
No, I actually can't. For some reason, I just can't get into wearing a wedding ring, but maybe a ceramic one. Maybe a ceramic one might do.
Mm-hmm. They make the rubber ones too, if you don't like gold.
Yeah, the silicone ones. Yeah, might have to try it, but I am wearing, and this is a little plug for hopefully tomorrow, I'll be releasing my review of this Casio edifice, the Cassie Oak. As you can see, it's very sort of Royal Oaky, sort of Nautilus. It's got lots of vibes in it, but $99, sapphire crystal, great bracelet. I'm also going to release a video comparing it to the PRX as well. So keep an eye out for that one. Watch Chris, actually. I bought this from Watch Chris. He got me on it. So I'm going to do a review. And then I also did a collab with Andy over at Tea and Tickers, which will be released soon, all about smaller watches. So keep an eye out for that. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. If you've not hit the thumbs up, please hit the thumbs up. We very much appreciate it. So before we go into the topic, let's just see if we've got Kevin. Welcome. Thank you I think Kevin's been on every single live stream. Thank you so much, Kevin. Jack, nice to see you, Jack. Mark, thanks for joining us. Bill, thanks for joining us tonight. Well, the topic is going to be Watchfinder's new video, which claims, so the man with the talking hands, now he's actually got his own channel where you can see his face.
Andrew Morgan, yes.
Yes, yeah. Is that his name? I keep forgetting his name. What was it? Henry Morgan, did you say?
I think isn't it Andrew Morgan, I think. Let me go check. I have it written down.
Yeah, it's Andrew. I know that. I don't know his last name, but it is Andrew.
Yeah, Andrew Morgan Watches, AMW.
Yeah, so he actually does have a channel where he's but for this video, it's titled "The Omega Moonwatch is the greatest watch ever made." No question mark. This is a statement. This is a line in the sand. And Watchfinder, all the watches they've reviewed, hundreds of watches. They sell hundreds of watches, and he has drawn a line in the sand that the Omega Speedmaster is the greatest watch that's ever made. I'll leave a link to that video, obviously, down below. Not that they need any more views. He's at 214,000 now, but he makes a good case. He goes into the history, but we're going to discuss it tonight because Todd probably mostly agrees. Patrick definitely doesn't agree, and I will be firmly in the middle. So, who
What?
wants
You
to
mean
light
I
that
don't like the Omega Moons watch? What are you guys talking about?
Yeah, Mark said it's absolutely amazing. Thanks, Mark. Okay, so first of all, why don't we talk about the upload that he made and the points that he made in that upload? Todd, maybe I'll start with you, see what you think, and then we'll get Patrick's reaction, maybe.
So, excuse me. So, obviously, this is designed to get viewers. We're not shocked at this.
No.
But I think that Mr. Talking Hands, Andrew Morgan, brings up many, many really good points as term. So keep in mind that he didn't say it was the best watch, because I think that that's impossible to categorize. It's like some of the rankings they do with guitarists in rock and roll. They do best. You can't do that because they all, the top ones bring so many different things to it. And so obviously the Omega Speedmaster is not the best watch to have if you're going diving. It's not the right tool for that job. But they said the greatest, like Muhammad Ali, is it the greatest for whatever categories, however you want to parse that. And so I like that part of it in terms of he is talking about the greatest. And I think we can make a really good argument that it is the greatest one, at least I think the greatest one that's still in production of the modern era, right? I mean, the Graves pocket watch, for example, and Patrick will know that one well, with the super complications and stuff. I mean, come on, that was a one-off, amazing bit of mechanical engineering and horology, right? I mean, you can't. I think that was a Patek, right? I don't think you can talk about that in the same language as mere mortal watches. But in terms of a production-based watch, I think you can make the argument that the Speedy is the greatest of all time. There you go.
Okay, and Todd, you've owned a Speed. I owned a Speedmaster for 10 years. Everybody who's watched the channel knows the story. I sold it just before I think it was just before the pandemic, actually. I got quite a good price for it, but I wore that for 10 years and I loved it. I loved the idea of it. I loved the idea of the Speedmaster. I loved the history. It wore well. It was fantastic. But I wouldn't say it's the greatest watch because the actual functionality of it, the Hesalite for a start, just scratched straight away. It isn't practical, I don't think, for a modern watch to have Hesalite on it. It's a romantic thing to have on a watch, but it really scratched up quite a lot. I even cracked it at one time. It didn't have hacking at all, so you couldn't hack the watch. I mean, arguably, you could say, well, its main function would have been the chronograph anyway, and that obviously does hack. It resets back to 0, but you could never get the exact time. You could never set it to the exact time because it never hacked. It didn't have the date also, but that's a side issue. But it was a good watch, a really good watch with a great history that arguably is. I mean, I think there's 120 watches now on Omega's website that have the Speedmaster name. So I liked it a lot, and I liked the time I spent with it. But I also didn't feel that bad about selling it either. I don't know it's the greatest watch that's ever been made, but that's my view. Patrick, I'll let you go on this one.
Well, I'll open it up a little, not as polite, but I will give the Moonwatch one piece of praise before I dig into it. Wonderfully priced.
Yeah.
So that is pretty much the saving grace that I can give to the Moonwatch is, for as long as it's been around and for the acclaim and for the history and for all the things that, for me personally, don't actually mean anything because I like a watch for a watch. I don't care that it's been to the moon. I don't care that it's old. I'd actually rather it be new. All of that stuff kind of is an irrelevant secondary point to me. But I will give them the benefit that they are wonderfully priced. And, even after they're push up in price in the last 2 years with their newest model, it's still most reasonably priced, really well made, because Omega makes great watches, chronograph. The negative, though, which my good friend Orange Hand said it perfectly just a couple comments ago, is it's pretty much the McDonald's of watches. It's popular, it's standard, but there's nothing delicious about it. Orange Hand, you the man. That sums it up for me perfect. It's a Lamagna base, which means they didn't even really make it themselves. Which hey, that's okay. Except they kind of brought it into their own lately. So I'm actually more impressed with the newer models now that they've put the coaxial escapement in there, and they've made it non-magnetic. Yay! It's still not waterproof, which as I said, is just a shame because that's such an easy thing to do. Make the watch a quasi-futuristic thing, which means give it something better than a $50 Timex I can buy at Walmart for my $7,000 price tag. And for that, I still have to give Omega a giant shame on you. But as I said, it's a high-quality watch, great price. I can't knock that. It's just McDonald's. So thank you, Orange Hand, for that perfect analogy.
Yeah, and as well, I suppose it's worth just showing here as well is that to say the Speedmaster is the greatest watch, I mean, all of these are Speedmasters over the years, but like I mentioned, even in the modern catalog, I think there's 120 watches or something that have the Speedmaster name. So the Speedmaster is, I was going to say it's more of an idea than a watch, but it's the name that so many different watches have adorned, and not all with many different movements, even digital. There's even LCD ones. So I think he was perhaps holding the Speedmaster Professional, but even that wasn't technically one that went to the moon. That with that movement in there, so it could have a bit an open-ended market. I did a really cheeky thing, and I was wondering whether they had like an abundance of Speedmasters on Watchfinder, and perhaps they were giving him a little cheeky wink saying, "Oh, we've got a few of these Speedmasters, would you mind doing a video?" But certainly on the US site, they haven't got an abundance of them. The professional one, which I think he was certainly leaning towards being the greatest, they've actually only got 13 on there. But they've certainly climbed up in price. When I bought mine, 12 years ago or whatever, I think I paid £1,500 for it. But even up till very recently, I remember them being in the threes. I think like 2015, 2000, that type of era. I think they've definitely probably increased more in the last 5 years than they did in the previous, incrementally than they have in its entire life, I feel like.
Yeah, that's probably about right. One of the articles that talks about it lately said that, or one of the recent articles rather, about the Moonwatch. And I guess we should talk about the Moonwatch specifically with this. You're right, because we have to. I agree. Omega makes way too many variants and especially limited editions. And I'm guilty because I have the CK 2998 2018 limited edition, which I would argue is perhaps the most beautiful panda dialed watch that you can buy in the modern era. I would even say that with the CK because it's just glorious. It's perfect in terms of dial proportions. There's no date, which I know you won't like, Sam, but I mean, it's just a very straightforward dial. And so anyhow, but that's another discussion perhaps. And I have the triple date, which is based on the 7750 family, I believe, or the Omega Speedmaster triple date that I got not long ago. But the Moonwatch, which mine is the last, 1963 movement one. So mine's the last one before they moved to the coaxial movement. I was able to get, and I got it through a deal through Dean Bump at Little Switzerland back when you could do that. And I think I paid $5,500 US for it, which is really, like Patrick said, it's really a great deal for what you get. And it's the Heselite one, so it's the traditional Moonwatch. And you're right, they're going up now because the Omega's raising prices. They're no longer offering discounts anymore. so that the price in the secondary markets have been rising even though there's no shortage of used moon watches. I mean, there's plenty out there. I would argue that it's not McDonald's. All right, that's a Seiko 5. A Seiko 5 is a McDonald's watch. It's great for what it is. You can't beat it, but it's not. The moon watch is not McDonald's. Come on, man.
Hey,
No
Orange
way.
Hand said it, not me.
I know Orange Hand said it. I mean, maybe you argue it's Ruth Chris Steakhouse. Okay, so there's more than just one, and there are several around the country. But we could argue that too.
Yeah,
but that's part of it,
do.
Sam, I think, is because the Omega's raising prices, same way Seiko is, and they're no longer offering discounts, which is bringing the secondary markets up.
Yeah, I think as well. I think this is a comment from Bobby here, who says the Speedmaster is the best made watch ever, best name, best history, and just the best chronograph. So Bobby owns, I think, all of the Snoopies as well. So he is a huge fan of the Speedmaster, and I can see myself definitely owning a Speedmaster again. If the Speedmaster 57 wasn't like $8,500, I don't understand why it's that expensive. If that was more in the 55, mark or whatever, I'd seriously look at that again. The other thing, Mark put a interesting point here. He said, the Speedy is one of the most iconic watches you can wear without being mugged afterwards. You're right. I wore a Speedmaster for arguably they're a lot more well known now because of the Moonswatch, but I wore a Speedmaster for 10 years, and I can remember the one person that noticed that I had it. In 10 years. One person noticed what it was. Actually noticed it was a Speedmaster, and that was another. It was just a random. I was in a meeting with somebody, because at that time in the UK, it was funny because everybody that made it to like a middle manager, like a sales manager or something like that, Seamasters for days. The Bond Seamaster was, you could tell just by looking at somebody. They are, oh, you manage a sales team, do you? Because they would have a Seamaster on. And nobody ever would give the second look to the Speedmaster. Then you might get engineers that were really into it, but then it was I think it was arguably a lot more affordable then, perhaps now. Or I don't know, we'd have to work it out with inflation, but yeah, I would never. But I loved the romance of it, and also flipping it over to the back because it was a manual wind and seeing that movement through that. Mine happened to have the sapphire case back, which was rare at the time that mine was made. That was rare. That wasn't a common thing that Omega did. They were almost always closed back. I keep wrongly calling it the sapphire sandwich, but mine had sapphire on the back and Hesalite on the front, so it wasn't the sapphire sandwich. It was actually quite a rare one, which meant that I was able to sell it for a little bit more. But I can see myself owning another Speedmaster. I do think, and I made a video about why I sold my Speedmaster, and in one of those, I made a point about I think they've done it a bit less now. I don't know what you guys think, but they almost went through a period of Seiko style limited editions, didn't they? Like those Speedy Tuesday ones, they were knocking out like they were going out of fashion. And it seemed like there was just like limited edition after limited edition. I don't feel like they're doing much of that anymore. I don't know what the panel thinks.
Yeah, well, someone was making a comment about that just a second ago about they're changing their terminology from limited edition to limited production,
Yeah,
which, I think is, that's kind of becoming the popular thing because people are making fun of limited editions. And, Grand Seiko is getting the nod on that right now because every 3 weeks they're coming out with a new limited edition watch, and most of them aren't that limited. I mean, 1,500 copies, 2,000 copies, that's not a real limited edition. If you're under 500, I think that's a little bit limited. If you get into that 200, 100 realm, now it actually is a real, to me, limited edition. And, definitely Omega was guilty of that in the past. And same as Todd said with the discounts, I think they're just trying to right all the wrongs that they've done to make their company better. Because, like I said, here comes an Omega compliment. You thought you'd never get one. They make great watches. So better than Rolex. But the idea is their marketing team isn't as good as Rolex's.
No.
And I think they're working on that by trying to get rid of the things that made them a little bit soft before. And I think Grand Seiko probably in the next couple years will probably copy that too because they're trying to go up market. But I think they're hurting themselves with all these limited editions and sort of saturating the market with too many watches. And you know, they all need to follow the Rolex model and make a really great watch that, you know, is iconic because that's what everyone's saying, iconic, iconic, iconic. And it keeps you interested and it keeps your story alive.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, Rolex catalog, you can't fault them. In many ways, my argument with Rolex, other than I think that they hate their customers. That's really my thing. They really hate their customers. I mean, because they're a marketing firm. I've said this many times, right? Rolex is a marketing company that makes a very good watch. And I know Sam's like going, no, but and Omega's more of a company, a wristwatch company that does marketing, right? I used to say very good marketing. I think you convinced me, Patrick. Maybe it's not as much, but if you look at how they've been doing it with the Bond franchise and other things, and of course they will never ever let you forget that they went to the moon. I mean, I will fully admit that. I mean, it's like if you were at a party with Omega, let's say Omega, the wristwatch, was a person at a party. Every other sentence out of their mouth would be, you know, we went to the moon. You know, we were the first to the moon. I mean, it would be that guy at the party that would annoy everyone there. Yeah, stay away from that guy.
Well, you know, it's funny because you mentioned that, and also, and this week Buzz Aldrin got married for I think it's the 4th or the 6th time or something. So
how old is he?
Aldrin.
He's 90 something.
He's 93, and his wife was 60 something. He looked great for it. He looks great for it.
He looks great.
Yeah, you're right. There's a couple of really good comments I'm going to get to here as well. But you're right that Omega seems so obsessed with the moon landings that they almost completely scrubbed Armstrong out of their history, didn't they? Everything was if you didn't know about the moon landings, or perhaps you weren't familiar with them. From Omega's marketing, you would think only Buzz Aldrin actually ever walked on the moon. And we know why, because Armstrong had to leave his watch behind, because which arguably is a significantly better story, I think. I mean, Omega milked that one like the only watch that saved these astronauts' life, who were the first to land on the was
and it was a Bulova timer, which I'm a huge Bulova fan, vintage Bulova fan too. I have a number of their tuning fork watches. The Bulova timer in the capsule broke, and they used Armstrong's Omega as a substitute. That's a great, to your point, Sam. That's a great story. I mean, come on.
Yeah, it's arguably a much better story.
Let me come in as Captain Negative just a little bit for this, because that line of the watch and the 13 seconds and how accurate it was, because that's what they always say. They always go, this accurate watch that did its 13-second burn. Even if that watch was 20 seconds fast per day, that 13 seconds would be so negligible it wouldn't actually have affected anything. So it could have been probably the most inaccurate Omega ever, and they still would have timed their burn just right. The only thing that they have is that it didn't break, which
that it didn't break, and that when you're right. Actually, the watch keeping capability of the watch is almost immaterial. You're right. It could be 2 minutes fast a day. You click that pusher, the upper right pusher, and that goes for. You're talking about Apollo 13, though, but But we go to 13. As long as it's very accurate in those 13 seconds to within the standards of a human being. Going click. You're right. I mean, in theory, there's a lot more error in the human being, because I studied human machine interactions in college and stuff like that. But to do that has a lot more error than that 13 seconds on that Omega. To your point, Patrick, it is true that it worked, and we can talk about. I mean, is that a segue into? I put a Fratello link into the private chat, but we can talk about how the 11 tests that NASA put it through are just unbelievable. Keep in mind, these are off-the-shelf 1960-ish, early 1960s watches. And what they put them through, and basically what the stock Omega was able to accomplish, is just beyond belief in terms of its performance. I'll say under duress. So for those of you who don't know, I'm in the aerospace defense industry. I've been doing this all my life. I used to work for the Navy, and now I work for a large contractor. And so I'm used to requirements like the object shall do blah, 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 blah. And so you come up with all these performance requirements. You bring your widget into that and you test it. And Omega originally spread this out to a bunch of different watch companies. I think they had 4 that actually responded to the original one. And they put it through this, series of tests. And Rolex couldn't do it with the original pre-Daytona chronograph they had, and Longines, which they both make excellent watches. Longines crystal melted off, and they had problems. And Omega's the only one that really made it through the whole test.
Yeah, I'll definitely go to the article. Yeah. Before we do that, we've got some good comments here. So
yeah, there's some really good comments, especially by Mark. I even though Mark's a little detracting, he's more like on Patrick's side. He makes some good comments.
Oh, I don't think Mark's on my stuff.
I know Mark couldn't make it tonight, but he's got some great comments. So Super Cruise said, I would agree the Speedy is probably the most iconic chronograph in history. Dive watches have their own unique story in history. Just look at the Blank Pound 50 Fathoms history, and I think it's military usage. Is that?
Yeah.
You're right. Is the Speedy the most iconic? But I think for the vast majority of people, if you said name a chronograph watch, the layperson that isn't into watches, they would probably say the Daytona. And bearing in mind, Omega, any Olympics that there's been in the last however many years, everything is about Omega timing on that. But I bet you 90% of the people that watch the Olympics couldn't name an Omega Speedmaster as the flagship product that Omega sell. They'd be like, oh, the people that make the people that sponsor the Olympics or make the timing machines for the Olympics. So yes, it is Mocha iconic, but I think maybe the Moon Swatch will save that. And then Super Cruise came back with another one saying the Speedy going to the moon is one thing. Hoyer's history with racing chronographs is another. 100% right. And Tag kind of, in my eyes, sullied this history for a long time. But obviously now they're coming back with some of the vintage pieces. But yeah, Hoyer, absolutely legendary. As you know, Todd, you've got your Hoyer. And
yeah, I got
and
my
what
Hoyer. Vintage Hoyer,
companies to make chronograph movements, original chronograph movements, working with Breitling and Hoyer Bjoren and
right.
De Bras.
Well, yeah. In fact, if you go to my Instagram, I have just put a picture up of where I put all 3 of the original competitors for the first automatic chronograph together, because I've finally been able to put together all 3 in my collection. So I have this Zenith, I have my Hoyer calculator from 1972, which has the caliber 12, and I have a 6139 Seiko in it. So those are the 3 that were competing for the first automatic chronograph put together. And each one of those, you're right, absolutely is an iconic chronograph unto themselves, right?
Yeah.
And so, yep, there it is. They're all 3 together. Now, these aren't obviously year representative. So the Zenith is the 99. So obviously that's not a 1969 El Primero. Eventually I'd love to get one, but those are a little bit out of reach at the moment. The Hoyer's close. It's a caliber 12. The caliber 11 was the first one invented by the Project 99 group, which I outlined in my Instagram. And then the left one is just happened to be the 6139 I happen to have on my wrist that day. I have one that's from March of 1969, because Seiko date codes all their case backs, so you know exactly when they were made and issued. And that one's a little bit later, but I do have a March 69 one. And I would argue, perhaps this is another show, I would argue that Seiko definitely was the first developer, first company that put out the automatic chronograph. I think we can make that argument pretty clear now, but nonetheless,
the
whole other thing. But so you can see all 3 there together. They're all iconic in their own way. Absolutely correct, Sam.
Yeah. So Mark says only 12 watches made it to the moon. The rest are copies.
Right. He's true.
James
There's only one Seiko Pogue that was on the wrist of Colonel Pogue, and the rest are copies.
Yeah. So James says 13 Mississippis probably would have gotten the Apollo 13 home safe. Yeah. So you're right. There's definitely a lot of other
Yeah, the fact that they had one failure, and I gave Patrick, you're right. There was one failure of the Speedy, during space exploration, and one popped a crystal, and that's when they brought the Bulova out. So the Bulova Moonwatch is the one that was the other watch, one of the other watches on the moon, because when one of the Speedies popped a crystal, it did serve as backups. That one of the astronauts had brought on themselves. I would argue that the current Bulova, while I really like the watch, is not representative of the original one at all. It's a completely different watch.
Yeah, it's massive, isn't it? The original one was more modesty size. The original one had a date as well on it, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was Bulova's automatic move, manual one, automatic movement at the time. I've forgotten which one, but yeah, it wasn't a quartz, which is nothing wrong with quartz because we have the X-33 Skywalker, which is an issued moon watch too now, or issued space watch. We should differentiate between space watches and moon watches, right? There's a difference.
Yeah, because there's been plenty of space watches, haven't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a whole website devoted to space watches that's really fascinating. The number of watches that have been in space, there's a lot. It's not necessarily a small amount. There's been a lot.
Oh yeah, G-Shocks and everything. G-Shocks have been in space. Old Timexes, Seiko SKX mod went into space. There's been plenty, hasn't there, that have gone into that have actual space watches. Yeah, for sure. Todd, did you want to? Well, Patrick, did you have any more views? And then I could jump into Todd's article here on the Speedmaster.
I mean, really, the only other, because the biggest gripe for me, which as I said, I'm not an icon follower. So the bad news for me is the more hype a watch gets for the sake of hype, the more I don't like the watch. And maybe that's just the elementary school kid in me who likes to push the girl he's got a crush on, but that's kind of how my brain works. It doesn't mean that I'm not on the list for a green Submariner. Mares, are you listening? Because I think it's a great watch, and it's the only Rolex besides my Sky Dweller that I even want, because to me it's the best watch with a pop of green. And so that's why I want that watch. Nothing to do with it being a Submariner, nothing about it being one of the first quote dive watches, et cetera, et cetera. I just like it because it's a darn good looking watch with a pop of green. And when I look at an Omega Moon watch or Speedy, besides the gray side of the moon, none of them make me go, ooh, that's neat. And as I said, besides the gray side, which, I was kind of on the fence of getting, except that I don't like the leather strap and there's not really another option for it. And of course, it's still not water resistant. So it wouldn't work in my daily life. And so it was enough for me to just say, no thanks. But by far, that's my favorite Speedy. But the Moonwatch itself, as I said, besides icon status, I don't really see what else it has. To me, it's just kind of a rather dull-looking, chronograph. And as I said, I know I'll get a lot of hate for that, but, that's just my take on it. And similarly, I think the Daytona is a very dull-looking chronograph, and I'll give the Omega props. At least it says what it is. It's the Moonwatch. The Cosmograph still has accolades from a prize it lost written right on the dial. So... why they didn't remove Cosmograph from the Daytona years ago boggles my mind, but they still haven't. It's still there. So at least, Omega, you're the winner.
Yeah, this gray side of the moon with the meteorite dial is probably one of the most amazing watches that I've ever had the opportunity to review. There's only a few watches that I've reviewed that I've had hands on where I've been like completely blown away by them. This was one that just an amazing watch. It's a shame that they're just so expensive now.
They're so expensive. Yeah, that's my only issue with these is that they are so expensive.
Yeah, they're like I think at 11, if you can get one for 11,000 is a good deal. I'm not sure how much. I think they were probably around the 9 or 8 or 9 when they were first released. But this is just incredible because it's just a ceramic case and then it's got the rose gold on it as well. But again, that's arguably a Speedmaster as well, isn't it? Certainly in there.
Yeah. That one's never been to space. I would guarantee it. which is odd considering it's a meteorite dial. I think if I was an astronaut, I'd want to bring one.
It's never
came from space. Yeah,
it's come one way. The dial came one way.
Yeah, as I said, I think that's a gorgeous watch, and you know, if they could put it on some kind of rubber or textile strap that was waterproof, and you know, hey, I might talk to my AD, but until that day, nope.
Yeah. And I think Mark was right in there. I'm kind of a contrarian too, which is one reason I'm a big Seiko fan. I mean, not that people don't like Seiko, but I think it's the greatest watch company ever. I will state that clearly. I think Seiko is, if we're going to talk about greatest, I think it's the greatest watch company that exists today. And we could talk, that's a whole nother show, but, and that's one reason I'm so attracted to their vintage chronographs. I just think it's the optimum of design and style of that era. But nonetheless, you know, we can go on forever with that, but yes, I'm a contrarian too. I'm with Patrick. One reason I'm not a Rolex fan is because it's so accepted and it's such an icon of status. And so I like kind of sliding under the radar. If you wear a 6138 vintage Seiko, nobody, unless they are really a watch nerd, will know what the heck it is that you're wearing. And that part is fun to me. But anyhow, yes, Jack, I love you too, Jack. Jack, you are my favorite commenter right now because you love Seiko chronographs. Subscribe. Go ahead.
Yes, yeah. Like I swapped onto my Seiko chronograph as well.
Yeah, I love. If I was going to buy a modern one, Sam, that one is to me like almost a perfect daily wearer watch.
Yeah, exactly. Even though the date is in the multiverse and another dimension of the multiverse, it's that far back into the case. But it really is. It's really comfortable. They've got this absolutely spot on. There's some Seikos there.
Do you know what this is, Todd?
Which one is that? It's got the horseshoe. Yeah, that's a vintage. Is that a recreation of one of the vintage horseshoe Seiko?
It's not a recreation. That's the real one. But I just learned of that, and going to, you know, a little off topic, but what Todd just said, you know, Seiko is one of my favorite brands too, just because they are innovators. And I just learned about that watch. It was one of the first, you know, somewhat electrical watches. It was pre-quartz, where it used kind of the exact opposite. It had almost an electronic start, but it had mechanical regulation versus kind of what a normal quartz would be the opposite way around. And as I said, I just learned about that. I'm like, oh my goodness, I have to do some homework on this watch and, you know, see if I can maybe find one. But just a really cool watch, and
it is
kind of going back to
one, but
kind of going back to our today's topic. That's kind of my gripe about, at least let's say our moon watch is, you know, besides the last couple of years where they threw a little bit of innovation in the new 3.8 et cetera movement, you know, it really hasn't changed too much. And I know, yes, you want to kind of hold on to it, but I do like when a company plays a little bit more. And I'm not yelling at Omega, because obviously they do a heck of a lot of stuff with their chiming watches and their central tourbillons, and, you know, they do make some
that
pretty
tourbillon,
fancy watches.
Wow, isn't that a crazy bit of horological work? No, that tourbillon they came up with, them and Seiko both, right, have come up with some really tremendous tourbillon, high end, you know, like designer one-off type things. Really amazing.
But I kind of wish that they would do a little bit more innovative in the realm of normal people watches, like their chronographs or, you know, their dive watches, you know, just something to once again get someone who's looking for something special to go, ooh, that's special. Because generally speaking, when I look at a lot of, you know, the main brand lines, they don't get my attention. And, you know, to me, that's kind of sad, because, you know, I want a watch that gets my attention.
Yeah, when I did the collab with Andy over on TNT, because we did a collab on smaller watches and if they're coming back in fashion. He's a big collector of smaller dress watches, and he was saying that what's one of the things that he thinks that the vintage dress watches have that you don't see anymore is the playfulness, the sort of playing around with design and things like that. Well, I guess a question would be then, do we think Watchfinder got it nearly right or wrong? And would we hazard a guess what might have been a better pick for him to say he's the greatest watch of all time.
Yeah, if you had to pick one and go out on that limb, what else would you choose?
Yeah.
Well, let me see. Let me jump on the first question first. And I think Todd nailed it with his opening line. I think it was just a complete clickbait title.
And we're
because
each clickbait deserves an equal and opposite clickbait.
Yeah. Well, they know that there's more Rolex fanboys out there than the rest. And so if you put a title out there that says Omega's the best, one, you're going to get all the Omega people go, yay, we love you. And you're going to get every Rolex person going, yeah, we hate you, but we love you and we'll watch it anyway. So, I don't think they meant any of it. I think it was more clicky because I suffered for 13 minutes just for you, Todd, and I watched that whole video. And during that video, they didn't really tell me why the watch is that good. I mean, they pretty much started by saying, hey, it's a Le Mans movement, and yeah, Patek uses it, and other companies use it, and it's a beautiful chronograph. But only till like the last 3 minutes did they actually say, oh yeah, by the way, the moon watch is, a fancy moon watch. So I think they were kind of grasping for things to talk about. They didn't really support their claim very well. But to get to the second question, if I had to pick, the best watch, I think I kind of have to steal from Todd again. He said you can't really pick a best, and I can kind of give you best in terms of multiple categories and, maybe something, all around. I mean, I'm going to throw my bias in there. If I had to pick a best watch, it's going to be a spring drive, because to me, a spring drive is the most revolutionary change we've had since, the lever escapement. The pocket watches I collect, 125-year-old, as water resistant as an Omega moon watch. There you go, Mark. They pretty much, they haven't changed. And the story of the spring drive is just so romantic. Some guy for 21 years sat in a corner of his office and plinked away at prototypes until he finally got one to work. I just think that's so awesome. And so for me, the spring drive is the icon of just let's make something cool and let's make something unique. So, as I said, it may not be the best watch in the world, but when I think something that really just makes me impressed, I've got to go spring drive.
Yeah, I would agree. I think spring drive is the greatest horological accomplishment of the 20th century. I'll state that right there. I don't think there's anything that you can point to that is greater than what Seiko did with the spring drive. That's, again, my humble opinion, but I'm with you there on Patrick. Absolutely.
Man, I mean, Todd, for you and I fighting so much over Omega, we sure are agreeing a lot today.
I wouldn't have invited you both on if I'd known you were going to agree with each other so much.
I think we agree a lot more than except for Omega. I think that's really maybe.
I don't know. I think in our private forum chat, I think a lot of people think we hate each other because you'll say Omega things and I'll make big poopy emojis, and and I don't think they realize that most of it's in fun.
And Mark's saying spring drive myth alert. They stopped developing it for quite some time in that 21-year period, almost as
true
as the moon watch.
Yeah, 100% true.
Yeah.
He definitely put it on the shelf and went along with his daily, because it obviously didn't take 21 years, but many prototypes, and it was a side project. So maybe take the years out of it. I still think it's a cool story.
Right. I mean, and Mark has a good point. If we want to say a one-off, the greatest watch of all time is the Harrison H4, because that basically revolutionized navigation aboard ships, that you could actually, be able to navigate to where you want to go. And of course, it's the prototype for all the pocket watches and everything else that came after that. But I think really we have to caveat the greatest watch of all time and something that would be not a one-off. Like I went back to the Graves watch from the early 20s from Patek. Yeah, absolutely, that's the most amazing watch I think I've ever seen. But it's not. It shouldn't really count in this, right? Is
this the Harrison? I think this might be the Harrison. Yeah,
the Harrison H4. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was the last one that Harrison made that really was something you could hold. The other Harrison H1, H2, H3 were larger machines that were much more complex. This was certainly something that was much more practical to bring aboard a ship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
yeah,
amazing.
maybe the greatest watch is a watch that belonged to somebody or did some, perhaps the Moon watch. Maybe the Speedmaster is the greatest watch, but it was the one that that's now lost that Buzz Aldrin had that went on the moon.
So to your point, let's measure greatness here. So the most money that was ever at auction for a watch was at one point the Paul Newman Rolex Daytona. Did anything ever surpass that, or is that still the standard?
I think something did. I feel like something went.
What did it go for, the Paul Newman? Because I mean,
17 million. I think it went for 17 million several years ago. It was a RO box auction, and they would televised it. I watched it live. It was like crazy. But what if someone finds the Buzz Aldrin Speedmaster?
Yeah.
And it's technically it's still NASA property, but let's pretend for a moment that it could be auctioned. Any hazard of guess what that would go for after all these years? I would say 100 million. I was thinking about this the other day. I bet that watch would go for some collector. Elon Musk would spend $100 million.
Bezos would do it.
Bezos
would
spend 100 million for that
10,000-year clock or whatever is in the ground that will keep ticking. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that would set a record. It would set a record easily.
Yeah. So it looks like it's been surpassed twice. The Daytona. The first was the Patek.
Oh, they resold the Graves watch. Yeah, the Super Complication Graves watch did go up for auction again. That's right, and sold for even more money. That, Patrick, that's your ultimate pocket watch right there, dude. Except it's like this big.
Yeah,
the huge pockets. To put it in.
I'm not sure we could even call that a pocket watch. That's a desk watch.
And what makes it so? Do you know what makes it worth 23?
Well, this was handmade for Philip Graves. He was a banker. He had a lot of money back in I think it was the 20s, and I think it's got 63 complications on it. It's actually got front and rear faces. And there's everything. There's like a Hebrew calendar on it. There's there's the regular calendar on it. It's got a moon phase. I mean, it's got an unbelievable amount of complexity associated with. It's just a marvel of mechanical engineering.
And then
I think there was one since then that was commissioned.
Oh, right. Similar. And then
the crime that is Patek, they can make something that awesome, but what are they known for? A three-hand Nautilus.
And the Aquador. Yeah, and then the
right.
Patek,
that's Tiffany blue.
Well, actually, that's
an amazing watch.
That one is the Tiffany blue one is on here actually as well. So you've got the Daytona. You got a lot of Pateks. Well, they're all of these are Pateks, and then you've got this. Patek 5160A, and then you've got there you go. There's this was the first Tiffany blue, wasn't it? Not 711, but it was one. Did some like rich kid buy it or something?
Yes, a kid named Zach, and I follow him on Instagram just because of it. Because pretty much you just see this he might be older, but he looks like he's about 27, and you just see this 27-year-old walking around New York wearing this watch, and I'm just surprised something bad hasn't happened to him yet. I don't want that to happen, Zach. Be safe.
Was he like was it crypto or something? He was a crypto millionaire or something.
I'm not sure.
I think it was crypto, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the backstory is. All I know is, supposedly whoever won it initially, I guess, bailed out, and so he was like the second highest, and they pretty much came to him and said, hey, will you pay what he was going to pay? And he's like, yep, I will. And he did. So out went $6.5 million, and he got one watch for it. Oh, my goodness.
And it was brilliant timing, because to get out of crypto then was great, because crypto has just tanked. So he made a very good investment with that.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
But anyhow, wait. Going back to the Speedmaster.
Yes.
I think we lost our track here. But going back to the Speedmaster, so So a little bit more of the story. So we know that of the original test that NASA produced, there's 11 tests, including temperature, pressure, vibration, classic stuff. That was, if you look at the abuse that those watches went through, it was amazing. Hamilton provided a pocket watch, which to me still is like somebody did not read the requirements. Sorry, Patrick, but a pocket watch is not so useful for an astronaut in space. But so it was really between Longines, Rolex, and Omega. But when they reissued the test for the shuttle era, there were 30 competitors for that. Guess who won? Omega with the Speedy won the competition again. So I'm just saying, from a pure, like my aerospace, beat it till it dies, because it's going to be in a lot of, horrible conditions, and you've got to make sure this thing's going to work. I mean, I used to be involved with systems we put in a barge and we blow up with dynamite to make sure that the system would be able to withstand a hit from a missile on a ship, let's say. This sucker still performed. It was still selected for the shuttle era. So there you go. It's in the link I sent you, Sam. It's a Fratello article. It's a really good one.
I've got it here. This is it, isn't it?
You can drop it into the overall chat.
It's here, isn't it? I'm showing it now, Todd. I think. No.
Yeah, well, I see Fratello, so it could be the same, but
this is the same article, isn't it, Todd? This one.
Oh wait, I'm sorry. Yeah, that is the same article. My bad. It's just very small on my screen. So.
Oh no worries. Yeah. So it actually goes through. I'll drop it into the description as well for sure. And I covered a bit in my video.
And that gentleman there, in the blue, the gentleman in the blue, that's the guy that conducted the test for NASA in the '60s.
Wow. well, I mean,
that's the engineer.
It is a good. Oh, there you go. This is some of the other ones? Wittenhauer and a Rolex Daytona.
Yeah, it was Longines Wittenhauer, right? Because they're the same company.
Oh, there you go. There's your tests there.
There's your tests, dude. Look at those tests. It's crazy what this thing went through. I mean, if this were a person, they would be seeing a psychologist for the rest of their life with the abuse that this poor watch went through. Yeah, the equivalent to that.
Yeah, well, said I'll give it credit for being tough. I said really my biggest gripe with it is, I wish they would just up the water resistance. And I know that's petty, but that's, as I said, it's just one of my things. And, I've said that about even current watches that came out like the Bel Canto. It's a great watch, but I can't buy it because it just doesn't have enough water resistance.
Well, you can't wear it to work. And I wouldn't wear a Speedy to work for what you do either. I'd wear a bloody Casio.
Yeah. Well, I said I'm a weirdo in terms of I go along with the, what's the point, except for my pocket watches, what's the point of having something if you don't use it? And, and I'd still use my pocket watches. I just don't dress up enough. But on those rare occasions that I get to actually put on a suit and tie, there's definitely a pocket watch, in some sort of pocket and or vest. But,
well, that's cool. I think that's cool, though.
Yeah.
I'll go with you on that.
So
I just need more events. So please, people, invite me to events where I can dress up.
We need to do a GoFundMe. Invite Patrick to black tie events.
Yeah, I will go to anybody's wedding. Just invite me to your wedding, and give me an excuse to dress up.
Yeah, and a final comment here. Jack's saying here. I wonder if the moon landing angle resonates more with people who were alive during the space race. I'm not sure. I think it goes in and out of fashion, doesn't it? Space, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I think with what we're doing now with the Artemis missions, trying to get back to Mars, I think is exciting. Like a younger generation towards the possibilities of where we're going to go. We just sent the Orion because my company makes the Orion. We sent the Orion around the moon as a trial, and we're going to land. The first woman on the moon is planned coming up in a couple of years, so that's exciting. And then the next stop would be how are we going to get to Mars? So
yeah, because the moon's being used as the leapfrog to get there. Is it? Are they still thinking of using that as the base, the liftoff point to get to Mars?
I think so. I have to look at the latest concept, but yeah. But
Cool.
if you got to get back to the moon and make sure it works before you shoot off to Mars.
Yeah, update the flag. It's probably a bit faded by UV by now. Awesome. Well, that was it. Well, should we summarize this? Do we think that Watchfinder was right or wrong? I think we've all decided it was just a little bit of a cheeky clickbait response, and he made some good points, but necessarily didn't convince everyone.
Here's my family tree right here.
Well,
The Omega. You can't really see it too well because my camera, I don't have my setup at home here, but yeah, they have the Moonwatch family tree all the way up to current.
Wow.
You see, look at that. You can trace it. You know, it's like a DNA analysis for a watch. So there you go, man.
Awesome. Well, there we go. Well, thanks, guys, for joining us. Thanks, everyone, for being super active in the comments. Very, very much appreciated. And thanks for all of the great questions and also added data that you put in there for us, added points on there. Really cool.
Yes, and thanks to all the Omega fans for not completely slaughtering me. Thank you.
Awesome. And thanks for the admins. Thanks, Chili, and everyone who was doing the admin tonight. As always, we really appreciate you watching, and we'll see you on Sunday for the Sunday Social. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Good night, everybody.